Welcome. My name is Hazel Bateman. I'm the president of IPRA, the International Pension Research Association, the host of today's webinar. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar. And in Australia, where I'm based, it's also practice to show our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which an event takes place. And so I would like to pay my respects to the Dharawal people and to their elders past and present. I'd now like to hand over to Mike Orzag, who's going to chair the webinar. Mike is Head of Global Research Services at WTW and also a fellow Executive Committee member of IPRA. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Hi, hello everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to introduce Lisa Brüggen, who many of you know. She's the newly appointed director of Netspar and a world-renowned expert on lots of topics connected with pensions and financial decisions. She's going to be talking broadly on the topic of choice architectures and decision support in retirement. She's going to talk for roughly 30 to 35 minutes. Please send your questions in the chat. We'll try to aggregate them. We will have plenty of time for discussion. But please, as the presentation is going on, if you have something that just comes to mind, please put them in the chat, and I'll try to aggregate them into good questions that can drive a very good discussion. Lisa?
Yes, thank you very much, Mike, and it's really my honor and pleasure to give today's webinar. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you, depending on where you are. Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. You actually already introduced me, but I wanted to take a minute to elaborate on this a little bit more, also to set the expectations, or so that you understand where I'm coming from and what my background is and what kind of talk you can expect from me. So I'm a professor of financial services, but I'm based in the marketing department. And so my background is also consumer behavior, service research, service design, basically background from which I'm used to think in a very customer-centric or member-centric way. And that was very refreshing when I entered the pension world about 10, 15 years ago, where I realized maybe that the type of questions that have been asked or the way in which questions have been asked were quite different than in the type of research that I was used to. And so indeed, over the years, I did quite some work on looking at how we can get people to better and sooner look into their retirement planning, work around pension communication and choice guidance. Indeed, I'm now the director of Netspar, which is a very nice new role to have. One day a week, I'm also still at the BIS Institute, which is a Maastricht University institute, an interdisciplinary institute looking at data and digitalization, which I consider to be very important, but they also come with their own challenges, be it ethical or other challenges. And the project that I'll present today was actually conducted at the BIS Institute. And I'm also the supervisory board of NIBUD, which is our Dutch Institute of Family Household Information. And I'm mentioning this because I think it's always important to keep in mind that we're not just looking from pension to pensions, but for people, pension and retirement planning is part of the overall financial planning, and actually even just part of their life. And so I think it's also important to not forget to consider this within the broader context. So one thing I realized when I looked at the nice list of participants from 35 different countries, which I think is really amazing, is that I definitely have to tell you a little bit more about the context in which this research was conducted. And I'll do my best to explain it clearly. If there are any questions, then please still post them to me, and I'm happy to elaborate on them. But even though most of you are maybe based in different countries, I guess many of you also heard that there was a major pension reform in the Netherlands. It was accepted in the first chamber in May, really on the very last day of that first chamber, because we'll have elections soon. And it's for the pension sector really big news. You may know from other countries that reforms do not always go very smooth, leading to protests and severe backlashes. In the Netherlands, for sure, there were also lots of discussion over the years. But in the end, the government, the social partners, so the labor unions, the employers, the pension funds, they all join forces and work towards this new scheme. And I don't really want to discuss it in detail because there are a lot of sort of technical things to it. The biggest shift really is that we're going from defined benefit towards defined contribution, and there are some variants of that. But I think for the talk today, maybe these details are also less important. I really want to focus on changes that really matter to the context of choice guidance and decision support. And so along with this reform, there was one major change, and that is that our supervisory body, the Authority of Financial Markets, which regulates the financial sector, they took a very new approach to how pension providers should support their members in taking decisions. And I'll come in a minute to what type of decision I'm actually talking about. But basically, they issued a new document, which is a guide to choice guidance, which they entitled Guide to Choice Guidance, empower participants to make appropriate retirement choices. And so what's quite interesting is that our Authority of Financial Markets, they have also a behavioral unit, and a lot of behavioral experts from behavioral economics, psychology, also worked on this document. They consulted with experts, with scientists to provide feedback, and they now have a very different approach to choice guidance. And the major difference is that what was mandatory in the past was just to inform people. So here on the screen, on the very left-hand side, you see providing information. So essentially, it was an obligation to clearly describe the decisions that people have to take and the pros and cons of these decisions. The major shift now in the new approach is that it's moving away from providing information more towards the right, this choice guidance, but this is actually a rather broad spectrum where all the pension providers have a lot of room to determine how exactly they want to do this. What's definitely forbidden in the Netherlands is that pension providers advise on very specific products. They need a different type of license accreditation to do that. But in the middle, there is lots of room in how they can actually give form, or how they can really fill in this decision support. So they could, for example, just use their own administrative data, and from what they see about the build-up retirement benefits from a person, basically provide information. Okay, here are the decisions you can make. These are the trade-offs that belong to these decisions, and then this is what you should consider. They could also take a somewhat broader perspective and say, okay, look, under these and these situations, for these and these life events, for these and these people, this is maybe a better or less good choice, or essentially providing more information on broader set of factors that actually are of importance when making such a decision. They could even take it one step further and not just provide all this information, take them to the choice guidance, which, by the way, also really involves showing on an individual level, like, hey, if you choose for this, this is how it would affect your retirement income. But they could also advise and suggest, like, okay, given your situation, this could be a sensible decision. And even that, again, they could also take on a broader set of variables and with a broader perspective. And so there's now actually this whole spectrum, and all the pension providers together with the social partners now have to figure out where they position themselves and how exactly they create this new choice guidance. And of course, in the decision that they're taking, one slide before it. So first, to actually mention, okay, what are now the decisions that people take? I know that these choices, they really differ depending on a country, but even depending on a very specific regulation. So in the Netherlands, almost all of the choices are really sort of at the point that people are about to retire, just shortly before that. And they either relate to the retirement date, where people can, for example, decide to retire earlier or later or part-time, or to the way in which the retirement income is paid out. And so that could be that it's just sort of the same amount of the rest of the life. It could be that they get more retirement income at the beginning of the retirement and less later, or the other way around, less in the beginning and more later. It could also in some forms even be that's a variable payout. So there are some choices that can make to the payout. And in the Netherlands, there's also the partner is also registered and normally receives benefits, especially when the partner ceases. And so that's also something that you could decide to either have or not have, and then you get a bit more retirement income. So these are the choices that are available in really almost all plans in the Netherlands. And then what's new in the new pension agreement is the lump sum choice. So at retirement, people can decide to take out 10% of their accumulated assets, but it cannot be combined with any of the other choices, or it should be more specific. It could be combined with the retirement date, but it could not be combined with a high-low or low-high or any other form of paying out the retirement income. So that's new. You often hear in reports also in the news that, oh, there is now more choice in the Dutch system. It's exactly one more choice that has been added to the set of choices. And then in some plans, it's also possible that members choose the level of investment risk they want to take. But that actually already existed in the past, and that will continue to exist, but only in a limited set of regulations. So these are the choices that are possible in the Netherlands, and also the type of choices I'll be talking about. Now, most of you, of course, very familiar also with behavioral insights, may know also this famous quote from Richard Taylor, the Nobel Prize winner, who once said that, okay, for many people, being asked to solve their own retirement savings problem is like being asked to build their own car. So what's maybe already challenging for some of us, and I would consider all of us experts, is definitely very difficult and complex for many people with less knowledge about the subject. And an important thing to keep in mind is that these choices, you make them once, and they determine the retirement income for the rest of the life. So these are very, very impactful decisions. So when pension providers now have to decide, okay, where do we position ourselves within this new spectrum that we can position ourselves in, of course, they take a lot of factors into consideration. So what I always advocate, given my background, is that it's very crucial that they look at the member needs and really what their members need to make a very a good decision. Another thing is that it's also important what their ambition is or their mission is. So some really take a very broad approach and really consider this their task to care for the members, where others have a much more narrow task definition of why they are on Earth and what they are supposed to do for the members. And cost, super important, because obviously, many would consider that more guidance and support would probably help the members, but is that really feasible? And with feasible, I think it's definitely, first of all, the cost aspect. I mean, it's super expensive to give everyone, for example, financial advice or to talk to everyone on the phone and really help and support them. But it's also even a capacity problem. So the sector in the Netherlands is already now looking for lots and lots of new employees to help them manage the transition that they are facing now in the upcoming years. And so to really give more support to the members requires more people who are able to do so. And that's definitely a challenge. It also asks a lot from the systems that they have. It asks a lot from the governance, from all the legal aspects that they have to consider. So I know a lot of pension providers that I talk to, they're very afraid to move more to the right because they are afraid that if they advise a member to take a certain decision, that it turns out, of course, in hindsight, you're always smarter, it turns out maybe that it worked out not as anticipated or less good than what the member had hoped for, or that it wasn't in line with what was said back then. And they're really afraid that they will get legal lawsuits basically from the members. Even though one important point to consider is that I also foresee that they could get into trouble if they don't do enough. So I am already aware of one case where a member complained at the pension provider that his retirement income was reduced. And what turned out, he thought it was just a cut. But where it turned out, he had chosen for a high-low construct, so he would receive more in the beginning and less later on. But he hadn't understood the trade-off, and he hadn't understood that really at date X, his retirement income would reduce by that amount. And so obviously, he was very disappointed and angry. So I think there's definitely also the danger that there could be lawsuits if providers are not doing enough in supporting their members in making these influential decisions. There are also ethical and privacy regulations. So in the Netherlands, we have the luxury that we have a social security number, and with a number and a safe login procedure from the government, it's actually possible to draw in a lot of different data sources that you can combine with the data from a pension provider. That's actually also what we did in the field experiment that I will show later on. So that means, for example, you can draw in information from the tax authority to have more income on the exact income of someone, the exact wealth that someone has, the debts, from which type of social support someone gets. So you can bring all that information together. So it is possible to create a more holistic picture of a person's financial situation. But that, of course, brings additional challenges, ethical considerations, privacy considerations that also play a role here. So all in all, of course, this is a really complex situation that the pension providers are in, and it's definitely a topic that receives a lot of attention in the Netherlands. So just in, I think today at a pre-discussion 2 or 3 weeks, there's a big event that Netspar organizes together with our pension federation and our association of insurance companies, just around choice guidance and decision support. So it's really something that everyone is actually working on at the moment. And that is also why we decided we would want to do some academic research about this highly relevant practical question. And that brings me now to the specific study that I wanted to present today. And the central research question was whether online support tools are actually sufficient to support pension plan participants in the choices that they make. And it's very interesting because I talked about the cost issue, I talked about the capacity problem. And so on the one hand, online tooling could be a solution, right? Because it's scalable, because it's very efficient in supporting participants. And the Netherlands are already quite advanced in terms of these personal environments and pension planners. We even have, it's called My Pension Overview from the government, which draws in information from all pension providers, so you can get an aggregated overview of what you've accumulated in the first and in the second pillar. So the tooling is quite sophisticated, and of course you can just extend also the scope of the tooling and adjust it, and thereby support participants. But then, of course, the big question is, now it's nice that it's scalable and it's more cost efficient, but does it really adequately support people? And so to examine this, we actually did 2 things. So in the first phase, we first wanted to check in with the pension providers to ask them a couple of questions, see where they stand, see what they see as risks and opportunities, and also inquire how far they want to go in the spectrum of choice guidance. And then in the second phase, we did a field experiment that I will present. So just to take out some highlights of this first phase where we talked to some pension providers. So we were really curious also to see whether they see this as a burden or an opportunity. And it was quite nice to see that actually many of them like this new approach and like this open norm, and also saw advantages to it. So the top 3 opportunities that they listed was, hey, this could really give us an opportunity to remain attractive. It could really help to protect participants from making wrong choices. Of course, an interesting question is what is right and what is wrong and who is the one to judge. But also it can help us to really fulfill our mission and our vision. They definitely also saw risks, and so the increase in costs, liability that they're really worried about, and also reputation risk, especially, of course, something goes wrong if one of their participants, for example, goes to the press, or that story is widely disseminated. So these were the opportunities and risks. Actually, I already mentioned it, 81% are in favor of this open standard. Now, one of the most interesting findings was that the opinions really diverged when it came to how broad or narrow you should fill in this decision support. So half of the pension providers we talked to, they actually said, oh, it's really important to adequately support them. You really need to know their entire financial situation. Otherwise, it's really impossible to guide them in a meaningful way. But also almost the other half, 40%, really disagreed with the statement. And it was also quite interestingly some difference in the type of pension funds that agreed and disagreed to the statement. And so we found more company-wide pension funds, so a pension fund that's linked to, you know, one company, one large employer. More of these pension funds disagreed. Whereas actually the more industry-wide pension funds, so think of, you know, for an entire sector, like government employees, like doctors or something, you know, these type of pension funds, more than 50% agreed that it's good to take a wider perspective. But it was interesting for us because there's not necessarily agreement really on what is actually good choice guidance, good decision support. So then we did a field experiment. And that was really a very nice experience, a very nice collaboration also, because as an academic researcher alone, I could have not pulled this off. What basically the whole context was that there was a very advanced tool available, a tool that would draw in information from a pension provider, but also from, you know, the tax authority and these other sources to create really a very holistic perspective or overview of the financial situation of a participant. And then in the tool, of course, the different choices were explained, their advantages and disadvantages, the trade-offs of the different choices. And participants who used the tool, they could also directly see, okay, if I decide to retire, if I go for a high-low, for example, then my retirement income in the beginning would be this, and then it would drop to this. Or if I would go for a low-high, it would be this, and then this. So they could directly see the impact of the choice on their personal situation. So that was the tool, and then the question was, what type of decisions do people take within that tool? And we wanted to compare that to a condition where people are either supported in a group with what we call a tool coach. So that was a person who would not talk about content, who would not talk about the choices or the financial situation of the person, but basically they could register for a session, and during the session they would go through the tool, but the tool coach would actually help them in using the tool and operating the tool. If they had a question, they could ask that. They could also go into a private chat if they felt that it was too sensitive. They didn't have to use their real name, and they didn't have to use their own pictures, so it was all very anonymous. And the idea was that maybe full financial advice, it's maybe too time intensive and too expensive. But maybe people want some form of human contact and some form of support and comfort, and could such a group setting maybe already be enough? But then the third condition was the most elaborate condition, so it was again exactly the same tool, but then every participant got a one-on-one financial advisor that they could basically discuss their situation with and go through the tool and ask everything they want to ask to come to the choice that they want to make. So these are the three conditions in our field experiment: just the tool with the group condition, and with the financial advisor. Of course, academically, what is not ideal is that you vary two things. So you vary on one hand, no support versus support, and then you also have one-on-one support versus group support, and the content support versus process support. So initially, we wanted to have many more conditions where we have a cleaner factorial experimental design. But as I will tell you in a minute, we also really wanted to have participants who are about to retire, for whom this is really a decision that they have to take within the next 5 years. And we got 5 pension funds to collaborate, but the sample size didn't allow us to have more conditions. And so that's a sacrifice we had to make here. The nice thing is that in our data, I think I have that on this next slide. So in our data, basically, we have all of the data from the tool usage. So we know how often they click, we know how many choices they look at, the time they spend, and whatever else we would want to know about it. We have administrative data, so we have all the data that also pension providers have about the income, whether married or not, or all of that type of information. And then afterwards, we also ask them a survey, and we can connect all of these data sources. One challenge that we had is that, we had 120 participants using the tool. For academic research, maybe that's not that much, but of course, practically, this is quite impressive, also given how expensive the entire experiment was, and all the resources that had to go into this, from an entire planning software behind the screens to reach the participants through the pension providers, have them register for a session, have them the pension advisors match to this. And an additional challenge we had is, especially in the group condition, several people didn't use their own name and their own the picture in there, but then they also did that for the survey, and so we had we were anticipating that we could use one linking ID to connect the tool data, administrative data, and the survey data, but that didn't work out for some participants, and so our respondent set was reduced even a little bit more. And so in the end, we ended up with 98 complete 98 respondents for whom we had tool data, administrative data, and survey data. And you see how that divides over the different groups. That's lows for the medium, for the second group, where it indeed went wrong a few times. We also already did the analyses where we could with like the larger data sets, and we didn't really find differences there. So I think this is the purest and the cleanest version. So that's why for now we actually focus on this. And one thing I should mention is that this is still very much work in progress. We've done a first set of analyses, but definitely much more is still possible. So if you have smart ideas and what else I could do or should look at, then please mention so. First, to give you a couple of background statistics about our samples. So you see that, we of course selected them so that they would retire within the next 5 years. So most of our response, 64 years, you see the distribution here. Actually, 66% have a partner in our sample. Almost all own a house. And that's also something that you can see in the next slide. I think through the pension funds that maybe collaborated, I think we definitely had participants that have higher than median incomes in the Netherlands. So they are definitely more wealthy maybe than the average Dutch. So you see here some information. So first, I'll show you, and I'll try to visualize for the talk now. So I'm always showing you these results for the 3 different conditions that we had, as well as the overall average. And so let's first look actually at the tool and also the number of adjustments that they make in the tool. So I think this could be a proxy for how actively they engage with the tool, as well as the number of pension choices that they look at in detail. And so you see that in a one-on-one session with the advisor, they significantly use the tool more than in the other conditions, and especially also for the choices they look at. And the number of choices that they look at, that was really surprising to me, because I should have stated that in the beginning, for this experiment, we selected 4 of the choices that I presented to you earlier. They will come back on one of the next slides. And we selected those 4 because they are available in all of the pension funds that collaborated with us at this point or in the near future. So we limited that a little bit. But they were also instructed that this was an experiment, and they should not base the decision on this only, that with a real pension fund, they can still possibly make a few more choices, and that they should reach out to them afterwards to learn more about that. But we have 4 choices, and you would think, I would probably look at all 4 of them and learn, okay, what are they about and how would they work out for me, and then make my decision. But especially in the group session, but also in the individual session, many people only look at a very limited set of these choices. So that was very surprising to me. You definitely see that more interaction is there with the in-group, with the advisor. And then also a nice feature of the tool is that it doesn't just allow you to look at your expected retirement income, but it also contrasts that with your expected expenses. So there's actually data that comes from NIBUD, the institute that I'm also involved in, and every year they do research on what people spend their money on, and based on this, they actually feed such tools, and they say, okay, people, for example, with this household composition and this type of income, they typically spend so and so much on housing, energy, transportation, all the different categories. And it's pre-filled based on that research, but you can also adjust it to your personal situation. So if you don't have a car, for example, you could maybe have more for public transportation and less for a car, or you can really adjust it so that it fits your situation. And in the session with the advisor, you also see that they make much more use of that to customize it, to actually really see, hey, this is my expected retirement income, and does it really match to what I expect to need during retirement? Whereas in the other conditions, they make very little use of that. Then very interesting. So now we come to the 4 choices that I should have explained earlier, and let me just show this right away. So the 4 choices that they could make is, okay, do you want just a fixed payout scheme where for the rest of your life, this is the amount that you will receive? They could also choose to have this high-low or low-high, or to use this lump sum that is now newly introduced. And so overall, you see that many choose for just a fixed payout, or also the high-low, so that you receive more in the beginning and less later on. Especially also for people who want to retire early, that's typically a way to fill up the gap between when you retire and until the government first pillar pension starts. So these were the 2 most popular choices. And on the right side, you see now how that differs per condition. And so it's not significantly different, I should say that. I think it's because the groups are rather small. I expected this year, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but for the fixed payout, you see that with the advisor, there are almost 20 percentage points less people who choose for the fixed payout compared to the other 2 conditions. And so I expected this to be statistically significant, but it's not. The differences here for the high and low are, I think, not so huge. A few more in the financial advisor conditions that choose for that. But I think here it's also quite interesting because no one really chooses for this low-high in independent or group condition, but some do with a financial advisor. It's a rather unusual choice that we don't see that much, but it seems to indicate that with the advisor, they come to a conclusion that this is what would fit their personal situation. And also the lump sum is slightly more popular here. So this is as to the findings as to the choices. What we also did, we asked both actually participants as well as advisors, how risky do you think these choices are? And that's also quite interesting. So in for participants, they consider the fixed payout as the least risky, and they consider the low-high as most risky. Then followed by the lump sum. And you see it's quite different for the advisors actually. So the advisors actually, for the lump sum, that's about the same, but they consider this low-high significantly less risky than participants. But then again, the high-low actually as more risky. So that's also interesting to see. Then in the survey, we also asked them a couple of questions, and here are the results for some of the questions. So first we asked them, okay, how confident are you now basically with the choice that you made in the tool? And you see on the left-hand side the statement. So I'm comfortable with the choice, I feel good about the choice, experience negative emotions, I feel okay about the choice, even if it's maybe not the best one, or that they think that's the best that they made. And so what's quite interesting is that really almost all people feel pretty good about the choice that they've made. So you see very high agreement to these statements. Many people actually say that they don't experience negative emotions at all. And even if they think it's maybe not the best choice I made, you know, I'm okay about that choice. So also high agreement with that. Only maybe they are not so sure whether it was really the best choice that they made. But overall, I think they feel pretty confident about the choice that they made. And there was no significant difference between the different conditions. That's also important to mention. Now, this is also very interesting. We asked about the understanding of the choice they made. So really their agreement to the statement, I understand the impact of the choice that I've made on my future financial situation. And so you see here that actually most of them, and also irrespective of the condition, really say, yeah, I do understand the impact. So they really have the feeling that they understand it. I think that's also an interesting finding as such, which seems to suggest, hey, maybe with such a tool alone, you can also already get quite far in guiding them so that they understand the decisions that they have to make, and also that they feel confident about these decisions. But now we come to an interesting finding to the expertise. So we also asked them, okay, how competent do you feel about pensions? And before this research, I was aware of the choices I can make around the retirement date. And so you see that about 50% says neutral, and then a quarter says competent, a quarter says not competent. Quite some are thought that they already knew which choices they made, and the rest was again divided. But to me, the most interesting finding of the entire study is maybe this one. So this is a question we had asked in the survey after they filled out the tool. We thought that this is the question that should not be sensitive to the treatment. We considered this more as a trait-like question, you know, I feel competent or not, I feel knowledgeable or not. But it turned out that there were significant differences depending on the condition. And the differences were so that in the advisor condition, people felt less knowledgeable than in the group or in the individual condition. So you see here, they feel most knowledgeable if they just fill out the tool by themselves, then followed by the group session. And there's really quite a difference to the financial advisor session. And at first we were really surprised by that, because maybe that was a variable where we hadn't expected difference. And when we thought a little bit more about it, we thought it's actually quite interesting, because it shows that we think maybe this is only by talking to an expert, they realize what they don't know And they realized that maybe after all, they didn't know as much as they thought they would. And maybe this is a much more realistic reflection of the level of expertise rather than what they said when just using the tool alone. For a lot of these other variables, actually always the session with the financial advisor scored best. So the session was considered to be most valuable, that it provided relevant insights, that it really helped them. So the financial session with the advisor scored very highly, and you really see that in the independent condition, it didn't score so high. And we also asked for willingness to pay. That's by far not what a financial advisor costs, but at least with the financial advisor experiencing that, it was significantly higher than in the other conditions. And also, I think a good sign is that when they were in the condition with the financial advisor, they were much more likely to want to learn more and actually educate themselves better and be busy with their retirement planning and take follow-up steps. So we thought that that's also interesting. And so in conclusion, I think we afterwards, we really had questioned whether an online tool alone is really good enough in supporting people. We saw that they feel pretty good about this and they think they understand, but maybe their self-judgment here is not that realistic. We saw some differences in the choices that they made, but they were not statistically significant, probably due to the small sample size. And the financial advisor condition really scored highest in terms of interaction with the tool, in terms of a valuable experience, and a lot of these other variables that they asked, but it led to this lower ratement of their own judgment. And so still an interesting question is, what is actually good decision support and what is good choice? And maybe we have some time to reflect on this. And at the very end, I just wanted to take one slide to alert you to just the Netspar knowledge that we also have around choice guidance and decision support. So we also have podcasts and our industry papers and academic papers. So if that's a topic you find interesting, maybe that's also something to look at or keep updated through our newsletter. And also have an ICPM program where we delve in much more depth into these and related questions.
So thank you very much for a great talk, and also thank you very much to Netspar. Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.